Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. Whether you've joined us here in Channing Hall or live on Zoom, welcome to worship. It is wonderful to be together on this beautiful day. We extend a special welcome to our visitors. We'd love to get to know more about you after the worship service. So if you haven't already, please stop by the newcomer table just outside those back doors in Robinson Lounge so that we can get you any information that you'd like about UU Princeton. We have a few announcements before we begin worship. The first is that the Racial Justice Ministries Indigenous Peoples Concerns Group invites you to join them at the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Powwow on Saturday, June 10th. We are organizing carpools from UU Princeton. All ages are welcome. The powwow features Native American dancing, drumming, and singing, and you can sign up by going to uuprinceton.org and clicking the Sign Up Genius tab on the front page there. And of course, we offer a huge thank you to the dozens of volunteers who made our spring sale this weekend such a success. Months of effort resulted in a building full of affordable items for sale to people in our community, and every penny of the proceeds will go back out to community groups doing wonderful nonprofit work. It takes a little while for the numbers to become finalized, but the numbers are still being tallied now, and so far it's a new spring sale record. Gross proceeds top $30,000. And you can still add to that because we have plenty of flowers left at our plant sale right outside those doors. You can come buy a plant for your garden, or for Mother's Day, $2 for a 4-pack or $20 for a flat. This is a huge event for the congregation. So if you had anything at all to do with making the spring sale happen, please rise so that we can thank you for your efforts. Thank you all so much for that wonderful event. And lastly, today we honor our ministerial intern over the year, Matthew Bachman, whose official term ended with us last week. Matthew helped with our leadership development and nominating committee. He offered adult faith development programs, led our Wonder and Wisdom piece in the liturgy several times, has preached and prayed and worshiped with us, and in doing so has been so generous with his gifts and skills. Matthew, I have appreciated your depth and wisdom almost as much as I've appreciated the love and compassion and inclusivity with which you've ministered to and with us. Wherever your path takes you, if it brings you back to Princeton, please come see us often. A pulpit is always here for you, as is a community always grateful for how you've helped us grow and serve this year. And for everyone, if you've been here for even a minute, you know that we celebrate things like this with cake. So there is cake in Robinson Lounge to thank and celebrate Matthew. Please stop by after the service and do that. And Matthew, please don't be a stranger. Thank you for everything. And now with mind and heart, may we celebrate and praise the one light that offers each sunbeam, the one breath that fills each body, the one fire that lights each spark, and the one sea to which all waters flow. Come as many and as one, let us worship together.
I will not play at tug of war. I'd rather play at a hug of war, where everyone hugs instead of tugs, where everyone giggles and rolls on the rug, where everyone kisses and everyone grins, and everyone cuddles and everyone wins. Shel Silverstein.
And let us join together in the spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, known by many names and none, known through song and silence, known through presence and freedom. We pause at this hour and rest in this space in peace and gratitude. And we hold in our hearts someone we love and another. And from there, we send them our love. And we hold in our hearts someone who hurts, and another, and we send them healing. And we hold in our hearts someone for whom we're grateful, and another, and we send them our gratitude. And when this prayer ends, we ask to remember the love and the hurt and the gratitude in our hearts. We ask to be reminded of each so that in the days to come, we love and heal and thank the people we're holding. May the peace, the strength, the spirit of this space lead us to those people. And may our hearts always remain open to all who can be blessed by the gifts of our lives and our faith. And in the silence of this shared space, we offer these, the prayers and meditations of our hearts.
I am the middle child of 3 siblings, all girls, each of us 2 years apart, which means that from the moment I was born, I have had frenemies. By all accounts, my older sister was very excited to have a new baby in the house when I was born. And I was also excited 2 years later to have a younger sibling when my little sister was born. She especially was very attached to me from the start. And as soon as she was crawling around and babbling words, I recognized the benefit of having a tiny minion to do my bidding. And we had a pretty good few years teaming up against my older sister, who really didn't have the killer instinct that it would have taken to get the upper hand on us. But eventually, my little sister got old enough to decide that she didn't want to be my henchman forever. And from then on, it was everyone for herself. Do any of you watch Succession on HBO? Well, it was kind of like that, except instead of fighting over a multi-billion-dollar media company, it was like who got to ride Target to shotgun or who got the remote control next. And we knew each other so well that each of us knew exactly the most hurtful thing we could possibly say to the other person, ammunition that we guarded carefully in a Cold War-esque game of brinksmanship and mutually assured destruction. Part of the trouble came from the fact that the 3 of us were a lot alike, which made it difficult to carve out separate identities for ourselves without first defeating the others. We had all played tennis from a very young age, so each of us wanted to be the top singles player or win the most matches. We did theater and performing arts together, always competing for the most lines, the best parts, the biggest solos. And we were good students as well. So we fought for who had the best grades on our report cards. A's weren't even enough. If my older sister had a 97, I needed a 99. And we never physically fought each other, as I'm told some siblings do. We didn't shout or scream at each other that often. We loved each other and we had a lot of fun, but we were definitely rivals and we had our moments of Machiavellian scheming. And I have had other rivals in the course of my life, people I've competed with for academic honors or work assignments or perceived social status. And over time, I began to notice a pattern. The people I initially butted heads with, the ones I found really annoying, were the ones who were the most like me. And part of that was probably my competitive mindset kicking in where it really didn't need to. There's a kind of zero-sum game paranoia that you get when you have learned to be hyper-competitive from childhood, thinking if she's just like me, maybe she's a better version of me and she'll get what I want, whatever that happens to be at the moment. But I think there's something deeper going on too. When I have a knee-jerk reaction to criticize or judge someone I meet, the traits that irritate me the most are the ones that I have as well. He's too opinionated. She's kind of cold. Why are they always talking about TV? That's not a personality. And when I see these things in others, I'm reminded of all the things that I dislike about myself. And so it's much easier to say, I don't like her than I don't like me. I want to, and I'm trying to get to a place where meeting someone similar to me, in good ways or bad, is a reason for excitement, where I can see the potential for friendship in those relationships rather than immediately jumping to rivalry. And I know that's possible because these days, after a couple decades living away from home, doing our own things, and finally finding separate identities for ourselves, the biggest frenemies of my childhood, my two sisters, are now my closest friends. Thank you.
Once, two monks were living in the desert discussing the world well beyond them. They had noticed that people in general tend to argue with one another a lot. They quarreled all the time, and the monks realized that they, even though they had lived together for many years, had never had a single argument. They decided that it was time for them to argue, but they weren't sure how to begin. So as they collaboratively brainstormed ideas, one of them saw this brick on the ground and said, I know, I'm going to say this brick is mine, and you say that it's your brick, and then we'll have an argument about who the brick belongs to. The other monk agreed, and so the first monk picked up the brick and said, are you ready? And the second monk said yes. And so the first monk said, this brick is mine. And the second monk, as expected, said, no, it isn't. That brick is mine. And the first monk responded, oh, fine then, don't get so upset. The brick is yours, just take it and go. And the story concludes with the narrator commenting, so they were unable to start a quarrel. I don't think they tried hard enough. I think they get an F for effort. I could have built a quarrel around that brick in a second. I had a good friend in college with whom I quarreled quite frequently. He was politically conservative, me not so much, and we would argue the expected sides of whatever issues came up. We were both politically minded and somewhat sharp of tongue, and probably a little too sure that each of us was always 100% right. Our arguments were less one-time events with a definite start and stop and more of a running conversation that could just sort of pop up at any given moment. He was very smart, very well-read, and very persuasive. And I knew that when we argued, I would be tested and pushed by his reason and his very nimble mind. I found it fun and fascinating, as I think he did too, although most of our friends were decidedly less interested in our frequent contentious exchanges. Some of them would just sort of drift off as we went at it. Often there would be some eye rolling involved. No matter to us, we were lost in battle. It's not that all we did was argue. We hung out all the time in many different settings and were for a stretch thoroughly interwoven into one another's lives. We played tennis and basketball together and spent endless late nights at the same hangouts with the same people in the same circles. In speech and debate, we traveled together, were supportive teammates to one another, and occasionally, when we both did well at the same time, respectfully competed against one another. He attended my wedding, and though we've lived in different cities for a long time now, we have, in recent years, easily rekindled a connection that feels natural and nicely old. It's only in recent years, however, that I've become as grateful as I wish I had been all along for the arguments that we had. At the time, they were a kind of fun sparring with a good friend who had different opinions than I had. I enjoyed the battles of wits and ideas, but I don't think I registered then how important and rare it would be to have a good friend with whom I could disagree and never agree, but remain committed to in brotherly affection. For even in our sharpest debates, and they did at times cross the line from healthy to toxic. Frankly, at times they leapt that line like a cat jumping onto a counter. There remained at core this friendship. There was an expectation that we would not agree, but that we would remain nonetheless supportive and encouraging of one another. We would remain, in the language of the poet Gwendolyn Brooks, each other's harvest, each other's business, each other's magnitude and bond. And differences of opinion would not get in the way of that basic but beautiful human connection. I'm grateful that this was an early introduction to political discourse in my life, for it sets a tone that lacks today but still feels right. This tone of guiding respect for people with whom I disagree, an expectation that there are good reasons for differences of opinion that can be uncovered by talking to one another, an interest in the other side of the discussion, articulated by the person who holds it, not as a mischaracterization by an opponent, even if, especially when I know I'll disagree with them. Little of that happens in discourse today, which makes its value earlier in my life even more guiding. And though I myself, in the climate of outrage and othering that defines our discourse, often fail to practice that for which I'm grateful, I know nonetheless that the wisdom is in there somewhere. And perhaps in my quieter, less online, more natural moments, I can remember just who I really want to be in this world. Sometimes a little retreat might help. The story about the quarreling monks comes from such a setting. It comes from the 4th or 5th century of the Common Era and is out of Egypt. It's part of what is commonly called the wisdom of the desert fathers, who were generally Christian monastics who renounced worldly pleasures and moved to the desert to live lives of austerity, work, and devotion. Their thinking was that the world was too sinful for them to live holy lives in it. So they removed themselves from society as much as they could and lived purposely very difficult lives. The avoidance of the market and the pursuits of standing and of the flesh, combined with the clarity of work, allowed them to study and to think in ways that would shape, through their writings, the broader faith for centuries to come. This happens in many faiths, though. Small groups of ascetics run off and isolate themselves in somewhat extreme faiths, not always forever, but at least for a little while. The Buddha did it. Jesus did it. All kinds of Judaic prophets mostly removed themselves from society to live lives more aligned with God as they understood all that. And while one can fruitfully argue the utility for doing so, it's more difficult to argue that some very wise and beautiful spiritual insights haven't come out of those practices. I have no desire to live the harsh, austere life of an ascetic. I like HVAC systems and takeout food and Jeopardy way too much for that. But whether it's Thoreau in his cabin or Julian of Norwich in her anchor hold, or a wise one named Amma Syncletica in the 3rd century, wisdom seems to come from this removal, at least for a while. Amma Syncletica is really interesting. She is what was termed a desert mother in Alexandria, whose wisdom was included along that of the desert fathers, and who represents an understudied and unappreciated broader source of wisdom. Born to a wealthy family, her life fell apart, and so she moved in with her sister to live as a caretaker. She renounced all of her worldly possessions and moved about in poverty as a hermit, which ended up attracting a bunch of other women to her, making it more difficult for the hermit to live her life as a hermit. Company makes it hard to hermit. If you're a hermit, you probably don't want people around you, but sometimes if you hermit right, people are going to want to be around you and you can't win. It's kind of like Forrest Gump going for a nice long run by himself after Jenny left him, only to find that a whole bunch of people decide to run alongside of him. 3 years, he's dealing with this crowd of people and all he wanted to be was alone. That's why he ran so far. He was trying to get away from them. For Amma Syncletica, the hermit stuff was a way to be closer to God, a classic rationale. But she also seemed to worry that people were attracted to the lifestyle as its own end. The end was God for her, not the lifestyle. And she is thought to have taught people to be more moderate in the lifestyle if the extremes were becoming the point of their practice. God was the point for her, not the lifestyle. So one can reason, live the lifestyle that brings you closer to God, whatever that is. For the monks in the first story, that lifestyle included such an unusual lack of argument that they didn't even know how to quarrel. The wise ones who wrote it even centered the possible quarrel around material goods, around ownership, knowing the arguments that have forever arisen over that topic. Wars have been fought over it, families torn asunder, friends turned to enemies. Any number of classic tragedies, modern and ancient, have been penned over property. But the first refuses the offer of argument, gives up the property, and we are led by that last line of, so they were unable to start a quarrel, to think that all is well. However, The line before that last line betrays that, because the first monk says, "The brick is yours. Just take it and go." Those are the last words of dialogue in the tale. Take it and go. And if followed, they leave the two in conflict, unreconciled. These two who live with each other and care for each other have played enemies for a moment. They've chosen to play act being a sort of frenemy. A frenemy is a slang term that usually refers to someone who acts friendly but is really an enemy. There's often subversion behind their smile, or an ulterior motive behind apparent acts of kindness that is really self-serving or even denigrating of the other. But in this case, the storyteller inverted that, and they were friends who acted like enemies, and they give us an apparently harmless, pleasant ending to their skit. But perhaps the wise ones gave us something else too. For the last word spoken was go, a word of distance, of coldness, a closed door, a shut window, a pulled curtain, a hurt and hardened heart. Perhaps the wise ones were hiding in the happiness a more difficult but necessary lesson, that take it and go means that a pretend argument turned into a real one very quickly and very easily. And that soon inverted the frenemies who were playing friends, playing enemies, and would become the other kind, enemies who were playing friends. In the fragile and shifting ecosystem of relationships, maybe the monks were warning us against playing too loose arguing, knowing that something small can easily turn into something very large, something that necessitates eventual reconciliation. Paula Cole-Jones, a UU leader in more ways than can be named here, but among her many acts of service is to currently serve on the Article 2 Study Commission, which is working on new language for our principles, has written about reconciliation in ways that I've always found really helpful. For her, when a relationship has been harmed, working toward wholeness and harmony is a process that begins with quite a bit of self-reflection and honesty. It can really begin when the reflection is deeper than look at what that other person did or said, and moves to what have I done or said. It involves consideration of the other and developing an understanding that one side is not the whole picture, and that in some way an encounter will be needed to get to that broader view, which allows for understanding. That broader view can't come into focus if the story ends with take it and go. At some point, it has to offer, can we talk about this? And the timing of that is important. If the timing is right for one but not the other, the timing isn't right. And that can be really difficult for the one who wants to restore the relationship very quickly. Patience, honesty, and a continued posture of openness toward a greater harmony that is always possible is her path toward reconciliation. The path can be prepared, can be mapped and swept and imagined over and over again, but it won't be taken until both monks are ready to travel it. And when that happens, the friends turned enemies turn friends again, and they will be closer in bond and affection than before. Turning frenemies into friends, reconciling with friends turned enemies, or less dramatically, reconciling with friends and family members who've disappointed us and who we've disappointed, is a process fueled by those practices of patience and honesty and staying open to one another. And it necessitates disagreement and discomfort. It demands talking about hard things and realizing that agreement may not be found, but mutual understanding might be. The monks divided over a brick, remember. Bricks can wall us off from each other, or they can shelter us together. They can be used to smash, or they can be used to lay down a path. They can be something we own or something we share, and in doing so, build lives more abundant in friendship and safety and joy. Bricks are like words in this way. They can tear down or they can build up. They can encourage or discourage. They can provide hope or lead to despair. They can lead to authentic friendships across all sorts of differences, or they can turn a small wrinkle into a large tear. And the good news is that our words are up to us. Others may influence them, but we choose them. And the timing is always right. And the agency is always ours to choose what will heal and not what will harm. No matter what else is happening, we can always serve healing and harmony even just a little bit. And even when we fail at that, another opportunity is coming right around the corner. For there will always be bricks. There will always be quarrels. There will always be frenemies and worse, and there will always be reconciliation, awaiting our animating touch in a world that needs the model of people overcoming great distances to encounter one another anew in love. May we be that people of love and reconciliation. Amen. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the spirit among you, and the people guiding you toward lives of greater love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with neighbor and stranger by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.